Thank you. Thank you for joining us today at JALT International 2021. Please welcome and Boon, who will be presenting on teaching conversation skills online. Mr. Andy Boon, you may begin.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the lovely introduction. And welcome to my presentation at JALT. First of all, thank you very much for joining me today. I know there are many choices at this time slot, so I do appreciate your presence here today. I'm going to start off with a warning that this is a commercial presentation. I will be talking about my textbook, Discover Conversation, but please don't run away just yet, because even if you never look at Discover Conversation, there'll be some useful ideas for how I went about teaching conversation skills online. My name is Andy Boon. I work at Toyo Gakuen University. I've been in Japan for 24 years. I started my first JALT conference in 2004. And today I'm going to be talking about conversation skills. I'm going to spend the first part of the presentation talking about the methodology behind Discover Conversation. Then I'm going to show you some of the ways that I taught conversation skills online. And at the end of the presentation, there'll be some tasks for you to do. Hopefully we'll be able to get there. So without further ado, let's begin. And I'd like to start off with the main methodology behind Discover Conversation. And this came from a desire myself as a language teacher to try and teach more authentic conversation in the classroom. And I found that a lot of the materials that I was using in the classroom really didn't set students up to be able to cope with authentic conversation, especially when they went overseas to travel. Some of my students would come back and go, "This isn't the English we learned in the classroom." So I wanted to think of a way that we could teach students more authentic conversation, but make it accessible to them. So I had this idea: what if we got speakers of English together and gave them a theme or a context or a topic and got them to talk? We recorded this interaction and we broke it down into similar terms for students to be able to understand. So what we did when we developed the book, we drew a list of conversational situations. You can see the picture here. Two university students see each other in the corridor at university. They are going to greet each other. They're maybe going to talk about the weekend. So what we did, we had a bunch of American actors who would improvise these conversations. I would send the situation, okay, I want you to imagine your university students, you see your friend in the corridor, and you're going to talk about the weekend. And that's as much information as we gave them. They would then act out this conversation completely spontaneously. I would get the recordings and I would work from the conversation and build the unit from the conversation. So Discover Conversation can introduce students to near authentic conversation. It's not authentic for several reasons. One, actors have done this with a prompt. Another thing is the conversations may have been edited by myself as material writer. I edited for length, and sometimes I would switch out more difficult vocabulary for a lexical term that's more familiar with students. However, each conversation retains the hesitations, the false starts, the overlaps of real, authentic conversation. It was really, really interesting when we were collecting the material for the book, how interesting these conversations were, how rich they were, and how teachable they were. So what's in Discover Conversation? It's a 12-unit book, and it's divided into different strands. The first strand is small talk. So we get students starting conversations with strangers and looking at introductions, which is the atypical start of a speaking book. However, this is very different, which we'll look at soon. Opening and closing conversations with somebody that you know, and being able to ask follow-up questions to get more information. So if you think back to the image of two students talking about their weekend, a quick corridor conversation, getting students to ask follow-up questions to get more information. The next units in the book are what we call transactional conversations. And a transactional conversation is one where there's a purpose in mind to the conversation. For example, you are inviting somebody to go somewhere on the weekend, or you are scheduling band practice or club practice, or you are with your friend on the street and you're deciding where you want to eat, what you want to eat, which restaurant you're going to go to, or you're thanking somebody for something that they've done, or you're requesting your friend to do something for you, or you have a problem and you want your friend to give you advice. So these are all transactional conversations, a conversation where there is a purpose to it, whereas small talk is more about maintaining friendship, finding out about one another, and the initial conversations you have when you first see your friend. The final units are based on storytelling. Storytelling are longer stretches of discourse for students to be able to manage. And we look at 3 types of stories. And we also want to include some negativity in the book. Sometimes EFL materials are all super shiny and positive. So we want students to tell a bad story, something bad that's happened to them. And the example in the book is about a negative experience in a restaurant where you go, you wait ages for your order, the food is cold, it tastes bad, the soda is flat, they mess up your order, you have to wait to pay the check at the end, you all give credit cards and they mess up the credit cards, just a completely negative experience. The second story is about something that you bought recently. And often when we buy something, there's a story behind it. When you go to a shop or a store and you're looking for something, there's a story. Oh, the other day I went shopping in this mall and I found this wonderful shirt and I wasn't sure if it was going to fit me. You know, often when we buy something, there is a story behind it. And Unit 12 is a story about something good that happens. The story that is told in the book is about winning a competition, winning a go-kart race. So small talk, transactions, and storytelling. And at the core of each unit is this near authentic conversation. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we collected these near authentic conversations, we transcribed them, and we analyzed them, and we built the units around these conversations. And I'll talk a little bit in the next slide about what a unit will look like. We're using the term blast because we want students to have a blast with the material. What blast will mean, the conversation that we've taken and we've transcribed, we have broken it down into discrete interactional moves that occur in the conversation. And we introduce each of these moves to the students. So this is building the conversation. We've broken it down into 5 or 6 moves, and we introduce each move to the students so that they can build the conversation. Then they have a gap fill with the conversation that we've got, the near authentic conversation, and they listen to the conversation. The language has already been introduced to students in the build. Sometimes when we play the audio, teachers may think, whoa, this is quite tricky for my student. Please don't think that, because you've already done a lot of work on building the conversation. After students have listened and they've completed the gap fill, they then work as mini discourse analysts, if you like, and they look at the conversation and they analyze the moves that they have learned in the build, and they can highlight these in the conversation. My students will often use different color highlights to show the moves in the conversation. After that, they now have a model conversation that they can work with, and it's time for them to start speaking. So they design their own role plays based on the situation in the unit, and they speak with many different students in the classroom. They record their conversations, and then for maybe a homework task, the T is for them to listen to the conversations that they've had and write up their dialogues as transcriptions. And the transcriptions are the parts that can be then assessed by the teacher. They could be turned in for part of the assessment of a course. What I'd like to do is to come out of my PowerPoint just for a moment. And what I'd like to do is show you Halico Online, where we can get the ebook of the Discover Conversation. And I'd just like to talk you through one of the units. So let me jump to okay, can everyone see the website? Can everyone see my screen? Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so this is Halico Online. I'm just going to go to the books that I've got in Halico Online. And here is Discover Conversation, the Teacher's Edition. Now, each of the units are available. And when you click on, you've got a choice of the student's book, the teacher's guide, or the audio. So I want to do the first lesson. So I am now going to share this. And I'll talk you through this. So in Unit 1, we are introducing students to the skill of small talk and starting a conversation with a stranger. And the situation that we are practicing is the first day of university or the first day of school, when maybe you walk into the classroom, other students are seated, the professor isn't there yet, and you need to sit down and maybe start a conversation with the person next to you. As I said, the conversation is the central part. And we have taken this conversation from actors who have improvised the dialogue. I've analyzed it, broken it down to moves, and to build student schemata based on the conversation that they're going to listen to, we have one image or a series of images in some of the units, and students can talk about the picture. What do you see in the picture? How would you feel in this situation? Where would you sit? What could you talk about with the other person? So it's a nice way to think about the situation that they're going to listen to. In section B, we work through the interactional moves that I've identified in each of the near authentic conversations. So for example, when you walk into a classroom for the first time, before you start a conversation with a stranger, you're going to have to get attention. And here you've got, hey, yeah, as an example. So students will work together to think of other examples that they could use to get attention. And there are 3 examples in the book. What we usually do in Discover Conversation is introduce the language that's going to be in the featured conversation, so students have been introduced to it already before they get to the gap fill activity. In the second move, requesting to sit down, there is an empty seat. You want to sit next to a stranger, you've got to ask permission to sit down. Can I sit here? Sure. Once again, breaking it down into discrete moves for students to practice. Can I sit here? Is this seat open? And they think of other ways that they can say this. Still working with the build, you need an opening question about the situation in small talk conversation. So we've got this note for students: when starting a conversation with a stranger, we may ask a question or comment on the situation. And here we have the example: have you taken any classes with this professor before? Or it could be, is this the right room for English 101? So students, once again, think about ways that they could comment on the situation or ask questions in the first lesson. Then you've got to be able to keep the small talk conversation going. Otherwise, the conversation will end. Your stranger, your partner sat next to you, will look away or get out their smartphone, and the conversation ends. So in move 4, keeping that conversation going. Have you taken any classes with the professor before? No, I hear he's really strict. Students have to think about how they would keep that conversation going. Move 5, introducing yourself. Most textbooks for English speaking will teach introduction, that you go from the beginning, you say, hi, Andy, nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Andy, nice to meet you. What's your name? Hi, I'm John, nice to meet you. But conversation doesn't work like that in real life. When you meet somebody, you don't introduce yourself till much later in the conversation. So here in Unit 1, we're getting students to realize that, first of all, you've got to sit down, you've got to comment on the situation, the conversation's got to start and keep going before you introduce yourself. And it's usually as a by the way. Oh, I'm Mike, by the way. So students, once again, think about how they could do that, how they could introduce themselves in the middle of a conversation. Then the conversation is going to close for a reason. We give the hint that the professor enters the room. How could you close the conversation, and how could you respond to that? Well, it looks like the class is going to start. Okay, talk to you later. So we've got the picture, we've got the build where students practice all of the discrete moves. Next, we go to the listening. Before students listen to the dialogue, they complete the missing words or phrases. Now, these are all missing words or phrases that they've already looked at in build. So when I've been teaching this, before I taught it online, I taught it face-to-face. It was interesting to see students go, aha, if I look back to section B, I will be able to do this. Then they listen to the dialogue, and I'll play that in a little while for you. They listen to this dialogue with all of the moves. Then the analysis part, they go through the moves, they look at this conversation. Now they've got the answers, and they color code it related to the moves. There's a review. Can you do this now? Now you've practiced this in section B. Can you use these interactional moves? Every unit has a chalkboard with Did You Notice? And here we can teach students additional information about natural spoken discourse. So for example, in line 7, 9, and 10, Mike and Jennifer start to say something but change what they say. Did you notice that? Or did you notice that Mike and Jennifer shorten because to cuz? Or did you notice that Jennifer uses to pause? So what we've done is isolate 3 or 4 interesting features of spoken interaction for students to notice and look back at. Then we get ready to speak. Students think of another situation where they might meet somebody and start a conversation with a stranger. Examples that students have come up with is at the gate to a plane, or at the bus stop, maybe even in a coffee shop. And then they role play. And this is the most important part of the unit, even though it's the smallest part. This is where students interact with one another and practice many different conversations, getting attention, asking to sit down if that is pertinent to the conversation, comment on the situation, keep it going, introduce, and close. They can then reflect on how they felt when they were doing the conversation. They can rate themselves and give a reason why they rated that. And then there's a space in the textbook for them to transcribe their conversations. Just to give you an idea of the conversation, Halico Online includes the audio. You can also download it from the website. I'll just play you the first audio so you get an idea of what it sounds like.
Discover Conversation, published by Halico. Unit 1, Conversation.
Hey,
Yeah,
can I sit here?
sure.
Have you taken any classes with this professor before?
No, I hear he's really strict.
Yeah, I heard that too. That's something I'm really, really worried about.
He's apparently one of the hardest graders for this particular level.
Oh man, I can't afford to fail any classes because I'm on a scholarship.
You know, I actually, I'm really worried about this because it's the last semester for me. I'm supposed to graduate next semester and if I don't pass this class, I'm not getting out of here.
Wow, well, I guess we just have to wish and hope that this guy is actually really not as strict as everyone says.
That's pretty unlikely.
Yeah. Oh, I'm Mike, by the way.
Oh, hi, I'm Jennifer.
Well, it looks like the professor's here.
Oh, no.
So the audio is fast. It has lots of features of natural spoken discourse, and it might be very challenging for students. But before they get to listen to the audio, they've already looked at all of those different activities for building the conversation. They've already looked at the transcript. They've already tried to guess the missing words. So when they listen, they're only listening for the gap fill. Then they can analyze it, get familiar with the moves and how this dialogue flows. Then they're ready to practice similar situations. As Linda mentioned in the chat, if you're shopping, maybe you're going to ask for a recommendation to somebody. I've started conversations with strangers when I used to go CD shopping, and you know, I'd start conversations about music. So that's an example of one of the units. It also comes with a teacher's guide, which gives a lot of the language that you can use. So as teacher, you don't have to think, oh, what else what other phrases can we use? There are phrases recommended throughout the teacher's guide for the teacher with all of the answers and some suggestions for how to teach in the teacher's guide. All right, so I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint. That's the one I am on. Okay, brilliant. So I've shown you Halico Online, and we've looked through one of the units, and I've talked about the methodology behind Discover Conversation. When I was given a conversation skills class by my university, I have a second-year course and a third-year course. And so I thought, this is fantastic because I can use Discover Conversation with my students. So I was really excited to use it. I'd been teaching it at a pharmacy class, which I do sometimes on the weekend. And that was the face-to-face, but I hadn't taught it with my university students yet. And then the pandemic hit. So like many teachers around the world, I had the dilemma of, how do I teach conversation skills online? Now, at my institution, they decided that we were going to use Microsoft Teams. If you're not familiar with Microsoft Teams, it's a learning management system, and there's lots that you can do with it, including Zoom-like conversations and breakout rooms, which I'll talk about in a little while. Here, I've taken a screenshot of my actual class. This is the one I taught last semester. Conversation Skills 1 is a second-year course. It's a one-semester course. It took place on Friday, third period. I had asked the school to limit this elective course to 25 to 30 students, because anymore it would be very difficult to teach speaking. But they informed me that 48 students had signed up for Conversation Skills 1. If that had been the classroom, it would have been a huge challenge. Because I was working online, it was much easier to manage. Once again, just to give you some background about teams, you can build a class team for each of your courses. And one thing that I like to do with Microsoft Teams to make it manageable, easy to understand for my students, I build lesson channels for each of the lessons. So you can see here, lesson 1.1 started on April 16th, and there were 14 lessons in this semester. I didn't take a screenshot as it went all the way down. So students will interact within a lesson channel. In each lesson channel, there is a file. So I could upload the audio for the listening. I could upload any worksheets that we were using. And there's an assignment function. And the assignments I put in the general channel. So you can see some of the assignments here. The final test assignment was there too. So how did I teach speaking online? How did I teach Discover Conversation online? I used a mix of typing tasks and speaking tasks. So if you remember from the walkthrough, section A of the unit is the big picture and students answer questions. It would have taken a lot of time to put 48 students into a Teams meeting, get them all into breakout rooms for this. Instead, I started each lesson with an attendance check, and then each unit, I could take a screenshot of this page. The students had the book at home, thankfully, but I took a screenshot with the questions, and I just gave them a task. You can see this is task 2, instructions to look at the page. They've got the book at home, look at the picture, think about the questions, and then type your answers. So this was wonderfully interactive because under this task thread, students would start to answer, and you get this flurry of activity as students started to answer the questions. I can't show you their responses because it has the students' names. So for privacy reasons, I haven't put that there. However, they began to answer the questions, and I could, give a thumbs up, or I could make corrections as students started to answer the question. So also with the build, I would use this same technique. Okay, now let's look at move 1. Move 1 is getting attention. Before you start a conversation with a stranger, can you think of phrases to get attention? And students would type. So we did a series of typing tasks in Teams. Then we would do a series of speaking tasks as well, and we would have one big Teams meeting. What I tended to do was to split the unit over 2 lessons. In the first lesson, attendance check, get students oriented to the picture, which is related to the conversation, go through each of the builds, and end with the listening activity. That will probably take 1 lesson, and students won't have done much speaking in that first lesson. The second lesson, I would then start off with a review, and I'll explain how I did this with the homework tasks in a moment. Then students would make their own role play situations by posting them in Teams. Once again, a typing task. Then I would take students into a Teams meeting where I could get them all into the main room and then put them into pairs in the breakout room. With 48 students, it was challenging. I'll be very, very honest. It was tough. Students don't always join the team immediately. They don't always join the meeting immediately. Sometimes you have to add them to breakout rooms after. With 48 students in the class, and I think I had about 46 regularly attending. That's about 23 breakout rooms that I have to manage. So one of the things I did, I would set up the task in Teams by typing it so students have a record of the task, then get them to the Teams meeting so that they could practice their role plays. And I would quickly go through as many breakout rooms as I can, jumping between breakout rooms to make sure students were on task. After a period of time, bring everyone back to the main session, recreate the breakout room so everyone has a new partner, send them back to breakout rooms for more practice, bring them back, give some feedback on what I'd heard in the breakout rooms, send them back to breakout rooms again. So in the second lesson, there was a lot of speaking being done. In the first lesson, it was more typing activities and building to the listening. The great thing about Teams is you can put the audio file into the lesson channel. Students can listen within that lesson channel so that they've got the audio in a dedicated space. If they want to go back to that lesson channel to check again, or if they miss the class, they can go back and check all of the interaction, all of the tasks we've done in the lesson. This is a huge advantage of using Microsoft Teams. So we would have a kind of, okay, we're going to do a lot of typing in this lesson and some listening, but in the second lesson, you're going to be speaking. And we're going to review quickly, we're going to build some role plays, and then we're going to go to breakout room, and you're going to be practicing with many people in that lesson. Is everybody okay so far?
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Just want to check I'm not going too fast. Okay, so during the lessons, I had this mix of typing tasks where students would answer different task questions. They've got the book at home. The speaking tasks are done in the Teams meeting. And I would always give students at the end of the lesson, there would be a homework task. One of the great advantages of using Microsoft Teams is the assignment function. Students can turn into Teams. I can be checking homework at any point. And believe me, when I had 48 students in the class, it was really useful to stagger that marking. You know, as students would submit, you get the eager students who would submit immediately, and then some would submit over the weekend, and then some would submit just before the lesson. So I could be giving feedback to students through Teams assignment. And sometimes it was just a case of checking the gap fill, checking their coding and going, great job. So sometimes the marking was very easy. So here's an example from lesson 2 as I focused on the first unit. So in lesson 2, lesson 1 was an introduction. Lesson 2 was the first part of unit 1 of Discover Conversation. So the homework is starting a conversation with a stranger. Please check through the moves in lesson 2 that you've done in the class. Read your textbook again, pages 6 to 9. Look at page 10, try to guess the missing words. Some students had done this in class and some hadn't. So this is why it's in the homework task. Listen to the audio. I can also attach the audio to the assignment task in Teams. So when students get this activity, they've got the audio as well. So they go to their textbook, click on the audio, and they do the task. Take a screenshot of their work and turn in to Teams. This was the first homework task. As we progress through the course, I could also include the analyzing homework as well, where there would be a section 4. Look at, after you've done the gap fill, look and highlight the codes and include that in your homework as well. One way that I graded Discover Conversation, students had 2 speaking tests, and with 48 students, that was a great challenge, but I managed to get through it. They had a speaking test at the mid part of their semester, and they had an end semester speaking test. What I did for the first one, I used Teams meeting and got pairs together. It was a huge challenge with 48 students. So for the second one, we'd gotten into storytelling. So what I had students do for the final test was to tell a story, record the telling of the story, and then upload that. So during the lesson, they had time to do this recording of the story. But another way that I assessed the course was through transcriptions. So through the lesson, and you can see here, lesson 3, they had their first assessed task. This is 10% of your final score. Repeat what was in the unit. Mike and Jennifer meeting for the first time. Look again at the moves, look at the conversation, review the unit, get together with a classmate. Role play and record a conversation in which you get attention, request to sit down, comment on the situation, keep the conversation going, introduce yourself, and close the conversation. So basically, students have to use the moves and record themselves. Your conversation should be the same length as or a little longer than Unit 1. Write your transcription and submit it as a Word document through Teams. Some students were able to do this because they had friends in the class and they could get together. Some students would just, because it's an online class and it's difficult for students to make friends, sometimes they would have a conversation and take both of the roles, which was very interesting in their recordings and their transcriptions. I've asked my students, Yuga and Udai, permission to show you or to play their homework for you. So just let me come out of sharing a moment. Then what I can do is go back in and share sound. Actually, you might be able to hear this quite well if I just play it from here. I'm just going to do an audio check.
Hey. Yep.
Can everyone hear that okay? Okay, good. All right. So this is Udai and Yuga starting a conversation with a stranger, although they are friends.
Hey.
Yep,
Can I sit here?
sure.
Have you taken any classes this professor before?
Yes, his class is really good.
Oh, really? I was worried about this class.
Don't worry about it. Take it easy.
Thanks. Oh, I'm Yule, by the way.
I'm Yuga.
Oh, professor is finally here.
Talk to you later, bro.
I got it, bro.
So there you go. That's Udai and Yuga. And they're adding some bros there in the conversation as well. All right, so let's head back to the PowerPoint. So I've explained how I taught speaking online, which was a challenge, but very doable. One lesson would be more of a typing activity where students are becoming familiar with the moves and the language they need to realize the move. Then we would have a big speaking lesson where we quickly review the dialogue from the previous week, and we get to a Teams meeting, which is similar to using Zoom, into breakout rooms and practice the dialogues many times. And then this was followed up by a homework task where they had to get together with a classmate and do the same. I asked my students for some feedback at the end of the course, knowing that I had this JALT presentation in November. And I asked them, what did they like about the conversation skills course and what didn't they like? And so here are some of the comments from my students. If students repeated the same kind of comment, I just included it here. So for example, I like talking with other students. So they got the chance in Teams meeting to interact. They liked the role playing, but they didn't like having to write the transcriptions because that was the homework task. Liked I was able to know how to talk. So that's very useful feedback, that the student felt that the book is a kind of like step-by-step guide to how to do more authentic conversation. But some students said nothing in Teams. This is very tricky when you're dealing with 48 students and you're in trying to get through 23 breakout rooms. Sometimes there will be some students who weren't interacting. What I tried to do was make sure that everybody was on task. But as I used to do in my French class at high school, maybe as I moved to the next breakout room, they stopped talking. That's why the homework task was there as well, to reinforce the speaking activities. This is a really nice comment by one of the students, and I think this is the power of Discover Conversation. I only knew how are you, I'm fine. I learned many phrases that I could use, which made me feel more like a native speaker. So this is great feedback that she felt. I mean, she didn't need to use the term native speaker, just, a competent speaker of English, because in Unit 2 Small Talk, students are introduced to many different ways than how are you, I'm fine, how are you, I'm fine, how are you, I'm fine. Other people, this was an interesting comment about my typing tasks. Obviously, when I put a task into Teams, the answers start to come from students. And if you need more time to think, or you're a slow typer, then the answers are going to be revealed by other students. And so quite a few students said, I got the answer before I had time to think. Now, with the building activities, this is fine, because if students are saying similar phrases, this reinforces the phrase. I could slip some answers into the thread as it evolved. But this was a negative part, I think, of teaching online. If it's face-to-face, I could have put them into small groups, and then I could have enlisted from the groups their answers. So they would only be working together in smaller pairs. I could have done that by getting them into a Teams meeting, but it takes a lot of time to get my students into Teams meeting, get the breakout room set up. Teams is a little bit slower than Zoom. They enjoyed role-playing. One student said that she was nervous to record and send the recording to me, but I was the only one who would listen to it. So yeah, I'm not sure why she was nervous. I liked the class because it followed the text one by one, and the teacher gave feedback. So, this is also about the structure of the textbook and the structure of the learning. This student felt it was very structured, and also in the assessed tasks, I gave feedback. I gave corrections. I gave suggestions of how to improve the conversation. And so students will get that written feedback through Teams. I like to practice talking with many people at the Teams meeting. It was fun to hear about the person who got pairs. What this student means, you never know what pair you're going to get, because I would set up the pairs. I would send them to the breakout rooms. With 23 breakout rooms, it's very difficult to maneuver students around the breakout rooms manually. So I would close all of the rooms, bring them back to the main session, give some feedback, encourage those pairs that were quieter, like, oh, some of the pairs were very quiet. And then I would send them back to a second breakout room, a third breakout room, so they would get a lot of chance to practice. So this student commented that they liked that chance, and they didn't know who they were going to be paired with, which is also a great way to get students interacting, especially online, because they may not know one another. Some friends will join the same elective, but it's one way to get them interacting and getting to know one another. I am running out of time a little bit, but what I wanted to do in the workshop part, we've got about 15 minutes left, is for you to have a look at one of the sample units and to think about how you would teach this online. So I'm going to give this a try. What I will do, just let me get the link for you. Just let me show you this as well.
Andy?
Yes.
I had a question,
Right.
and I don't want to interfere with the workshop space.
Yeah.
But can I ask it while it's fresh in my mind? And
Yeah,
maybe
please do. Yeah.
later. Now you were talking about this being used in a kind of discussion, conversation, speaking course.
That's right.
If you were teaching a kind of, more like 4 skills, or sold as a 4 skills course, could you use this book and
I would,
just in conjunction with other things, or do you think it would take more time? You'd have to really focus on this
it
book.
would be possible because this really does focus on speaking skills, conversation skills.
Okay.
It's got the listening there because they're listening to one another, plus they're listening to the dialogues, but there would be no reading and writing. You could argue that the transcription is writing, but it's not really writing. So if you were to supplement it with your own reading material,
Sure.
plus you may have a writing course that you've done. I teach a writing course without a textbook, and I use one with a textbook. You could supplement it. So you could have, okay, I'm going to use Discover Conversation for the speaking and listening component, and for the reading and writing, I'm going to, make my own.
Right.
Especially with the transactional ones, like when, you could link it with like finding somewhere to eat. They do the speaking, and then they have to go and eat somewhere and write a restaurant review. So, you might be able to find interesting parallels where you do the speaking of the restaurant, you do the recommending, and then you do some reading of restaurant reviews and some writing with your own supplementary material.
Connected to that, if you have a 90-minute to 100-minute university class, do you think that you could use this book for, say, a half a class period, and then, as you say, the other half class period is sort of your own things?
Depends on the level of the students. I've done this course 2 ways. I've done it where I rushed through the book in 1 semester, not knowing that I had a 3rd-year conversation skills course. So what I've now done this year, I slowed it down. I spent 2 lessons on 1 unit, and I'm going to do half of the book next year with the 2nd years who took it. If they join the 3rd-year course, I can do the units that weren't covered. So you might find, but it depends on the level of the students and how quick that they work through the material. My students would take quite a bit of time to get to grips with the moves and the listening, and that will be a nice 90-minute point, and then the speaking in the second 90-minute chunk. So, all right, I'm just going to show you. I'll get back to you in a moment, Robert, when we do the Q&A. I'm just going to do this for a few minutes. This is the Halico website. And if you go to Products Discover Conversation, you'll find a lot of information about the course. There's also information about how you can buy the book through Englishbooks.jp. Thank you for sponsoring me, Englishbooks.jp. There's a presentation that I did. It's about 10 minutes, which gives you the methodology of the book. But there's also some sample pages. And this one is a transactional unit. It's about inviting somebody to go to the zoo on the weekend. What I wanted you to do, if we had more time, is to take a look at this and think about how you could teach it online. Now, we've got about 5 minutes, so it might be really interesting to just put you very quickly into a breakout room. I'll send the link through the chat box. And I don't expect you to be able to do much in 5 minutes, but maybe you can have a nice chat about the material and teaching online, and we'll come back for the last 5 minutes. Does that sound okay? All right, so I'm going to send you the link, and then you have to scroll to the bottom of the page to get to the sample unit about the about inviting. Now, I've got about 9 people, so I'm just going to make 2 very quick breakout rooms, and I'm only going to give you about 5 minutes, which is a really super quick time. So when you get to your breakout room, you can quickly say hi, click on the web page, have a quick look at the material, or you could just think about the walkthrough that I gave you, and then think about how you could teach this material online or even face-to-face if you so wished. So I'll just give you a very quick 5-minute breakout room. All right, let's go.
I had to quiet my wife. She thought I was speaking to her.
If you scroll down, you get to the sample pages.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it here under
No,
resources?
just go up.
Go up. Oh,
There you go. There you go. The one with the giraffe, yeah? That's unit 4.
Hmm.
And if you click the arrows on that page, you can flick through the pages of the unit.
Mm-hmm. I really like the way you've got the kind of, genre-based analysis of it, with the different moves and things, because that gives students something to play with.
Yeah.
That, like, when you break something up into its moves, then it's like, okay, here's your container. Now fill it with the content you need. Fill it with the words you need.
As I mentioned, the conversation in task C, that is the core of the unit. So when we got these near authentic conversations, I analyzed them, broke them down into, because I did genre analysis for my PhD, broke it down into moves.
Yes.
Put it back. Now, the interesting thing, when you repeat the conversations, because unit 12, this is some insider knowledge, unit 12 didn't come from the actors. It came from me and David Harrington. And we recorded the conversation naturally, and we used that dialogue for unit 12. It had all of the moves for storytelling. It was amazing. So, the moves are there in the conversations. All right, I'm just going to jump to the other breakout room, and I'll see you back in the main session.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay.
Right. I think you're the only one in this breakout room. So let me move you to the other breakout room.
As well. I was as well. That's why I was asking a bit about time. But I guess it's the kind of genre analysis and practice, Andy, that takes quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
We were just talking about how much time it takes, surprisingly, 2 lessons for 1 unit.
I've taught this 2 ways. The first way was my mistake, because I thought I only had the conversation skills course once for 1 semester. So I had the students buy the book. So I tried to push it so we did 1 unit per semester. It's doable with a lot of homework. But then when I realized that I've got 2nd year and 3rd year, I've got conversation skills 1 and 2. With the 2nd years, I slowed it down this year so that next year I can use half of the book again. So what I did was, the cutoff point was the conversation. So A, B, C is 1 90-minute class. D, E, F. D is the review. E is the review. So do D, maybe do D for homework, but review at the start of the class. Then do E, G, F, G, and then H is the homework. And they would have 2 sets of homework. One would be for those who hadn't done the listening in class, do the listening, and do the coding of the dialogue. So that's the way I split it. We'll go back to the main. I set up breakout rooms and a few people ran away, so sorry about that. But yeah, it would be possible to use it if you were willing to supplement,
Oh yeah, a lot of the classes that I teach, I don't use textbooks in, but one of the things right now, I don't have a class that would fit this, but if I did, and one of the things I like about it is just the way that the conversation is broken up into moves, and the fact that it's a very authentic piece of text that you've
Yeah.
come up with. I think it's really, that's the future. This is the way we have to go. I also like the transcribing. You know, might make people more aware of what they're saying.
I'm going to bring everyone back to the main session. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me,
You're
Mr.
muted.
Nancy.
You're muted.
You mute yourself.
Yeah, it muted me when I came back. Thank you. So just to give you my final slide is a thank you very much for coming today. And my email address is there for you. But if you Google me, you'll find my email address anyway. And I think we've got about 3 minutes for Q&A. If you do have any questions, I can answer them super quickly.
Is 45 the typical number of students in a class at your university?
No, I think it was a special case. The year before when I did it, I had about 16 students only, but they did warn me that 48 students have signed up. So because it's a faculty course and it's an elective, and I couldn't really say no. So I thought, well, I'm teaching it online anyway, so let's see how it goes. And it was actually fun in a kind of strange way. So many students. Yeah.
But you were going around to every single breakout room?
I was trying to do as best as I could. I couldn't get through to every breakout room, but I did the best I could just to make sure the students are on task.
I've been teaching online for about almost 2 years now, and I burned myself out doing that in the last year. So this year I do it in the first class, and then I occasionally go around in the second class, but they know that I might pop in, so they're pretty good, but it may depend on the level of the students as well.
I mean, the thing is, I reinforced this with the homework task. So there was always a homework task, whether it be a practice or an actual assessed piece of work. So if they skipped out on the, because sometimes students couldn't join because of Wi-Fi issues. So if they skipped out of the Teams meeting, they would still get it for the homework. They would still have to review the moves and review the dialogue and do the homework. So, you know, it worked out really well. And I think we are coming to, there's about a minute left. Is that correct? Okay. Well, I will stop recording. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.